the fundamental ecology of these viruses are going to argue that it's going to happen again and again and again, and one of these is going to be just right, with the right amount of mortality, the right amount of transmissibility, that it can't be stopped.
You're saying these are diverse coronaviruses and you can't vaccinate against them, there are no antivirals. What do we do?
Well, so I think that coronaviruses are pretty good. I mean, you're a virologist, you know all this stuff, but you can manipulate them in the lab pretty easily.
Okay. And Dr. Yang, what do you say to your critics who say to you, Doctor, to intentionally...
Hey everybody, it's Everett with Ohio for Freedom, and I have to interrupt right there because it's about to get too scary for Mr. Zuckerberg to be able to handle, and I am going to release this on Facebook as well as the other platforms, but Epoch Times ran a story yesterday about 3 congresspersons that are daring to question Peter DASZAK and EcoHealth Alliance. Folks, this is a big, big story. We're going to tie it into some other things. Got a lot to talk about. Let's get started.
I hear the sweet sound of freedom, and I won't be long.
As usual, please like, please share. Please share. Please subscribe, and please leave a comment, especially on Facebook, because Facebook hates it when you leave a comment on this platform. They hate the truth seekers. They hate the freedom lovers. So that means they hate us. But fight back and leave a comment. You can always find anything that we post on ohioforfreedom.com. It's been a little neglected of late, but it's going through a big facelift. And so you can always go there. And when you go there, please subscribe. And when you subscribe, please click the confirmation email so it's not an academic exercise. Folks, we have spent a little bit of time over the last couple of weeks building some infrastructure and making some changes that you will be seeing here shortly. And we're in this for the long haul. And I want to tell you what's actually happening in the country right now. If you are a little tired or a little discouraged or a little just weary, wondering what's going on about what happened in November, what's going on with, they're talking about passports and all different kinds of things. What's really happening is what you're seeing on the screen right now. Now that is a popcorn popper that was given to my wife and I as a Christmas gift this year. And I got to tell you, when you have access to theater quality popcorn every night, you don't get tired of it. Unfortunately, it becomes a staple. But when you put that popcorn and that popcorn popper and apply the heat, nothing happens. And when you're waiting for it, it seems like it takes forever. And then you hear a little pop, 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 and then the intensity and the speed picks up, and then that little lid starts flapping as these kernels begin to spill over that bucket. But eventually that lid is fully open, and it stays open because the popcorn can't be contained. And that popcorn, ladies and gentlemen, is a metaphor for truth. Because the truth cannot be contained. The truth cannot be restrained. It can't be stopped. And so I could be forever talking about all the voices that are speaking truth, and everybody has had to kind of back up, regroup, figure out how to get around the Zuckerberg bots, and how to get around YouTube, and how to completely ditch. By the way, have you noticed Twitter stock is down like 30%? That's a wonderful thing, but we're not going away, and the truth is going to prevail, and so there's a lot of topics that we'll be talking about in the future, but I want to get to this right now. I have put together a 49-minute kind of a documentary almost on the origins of the CC, whatever that illness is that's been gripping the world. And I am not going to post that on Facebook, but I saw this story from the Epoch Times yesterday, and I wanted to put this video together. And here is the title: GOP House members pose questions to U.S. nonprofit that helped fund Wuhan lab. And we read about 4 paragraphs in, the representatives are Kathy McMorris Rogers from Washington, Brett Guthrie of Kentucky, Rep. Morgan Griffith of Virginia. They signed a 10-page single-space letter dated April 16th that addressed 34 detailed questions to Dr. Peter DASZAK, president of EcoHealth Alliance, a New York-based nonprofit. Now, if you are not familiar with Peter DASZAK, and I cover him in a lot of detail in the little documentary-ish video that I mentioned earlier, I'm going to give you a little glimpse into what he's all about, and we're going to do that right now.
Raise money, yeah. And another advantage of being a 501c3 is we have this history of being a charitable sort of conservation, saving wildlife organisation. So we've got all the major donors that support that. We've got the public that donate. We have a charity gala in New York every year. So we have all these sort of non-profit things we do. But over 80% of our funds comes from federal support. So we, like a university department, we're going after federal money all the time. Yeah.
So, folks, that is Peter DASZAK. I listened to that entire interview, and it took place in December of 2019. It's about an hour long, so I suffered through it. And at least 8 or 9 times he's talking about raising money, raising money, raising money. He's bragging about the fact that they're positioned to appeal to all these nonprofits, and they're, organized as a nonprofit. But what they're really good at is soaking the American taxpayer. Now, I'm going to go over here to give you a little more clue into what this guy's all about. And this is from Dr. David Martin's dossier on Fauci, and we're going to read on page 8. DASZAK reiterated, until an infection, this is him speaking, until an infectious disease crisis is very real, present, and at an emergency threshold, it is often largely ignored. To sustain the funding base beyond the crisis, he said, we need to increase public understanding of the need for MCMs such as pan-influenza or pan-coronavirus vaccine. Now listen to this. A key driver is the media, and the economics follow the hype. We need to use that hype to our advantage to get to the real issues. Investors will respond if they see profit at the end of the process. Folks, is that the way a scientist thinks? I thought scientists dealt with, science, but this guy thinks about money, and he thinks about propaganda, and he thinks about spin, and he thinks about hype. Now, I'm going to scoot over back to the article, and I want to read a little bit from the preface to this letter that these 3 congresspersons sent. And let's just read this. We'll get a little wordy, but hang in there with me. We write to request information and documents from EcoHealth Alliance related to the origins of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, including possible pandemic links to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I'm going to skip down here just a little bit. Now, speaking about DASZAK, DASZAK's nonprofit, listen to these numbers, folks, has received nearly $13 million under 37 separate federal contracts since 2008 and more than $206 million under 82 separate grants since the same year, according to the data compiled by the USAspending.gov. That's like, add it up. I mean, that's like $220-something million that this guy has soaked the U.S. government for, and he's gotten it from Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, Department of Health and Human Services, Agency for International Development, Department of Interior, and the Department of Agriculture. That's a lot of money. But at least you know it's spent in a carefully controlled and carefully regulated and carefully monitored environment, right? Actually, no. This is going to unnerve you.
So give me an overview. You said you have labs throughout the world that you work with. Are they They're not employees of yours, though. You contract them, or some of them are?
Usually we subcontract to labs, but we usually try and have, in every country, a country program officer who manages the work we do in a country, sometimes regional. And we often hire technicians in labs or PhD students, to have a presence in the lab. There's more of a buy-in when you've got a person there.
Okay.
Well, that makes you feel better, don't it? All that taxpayer money. I just had a little brain lapse there. It's $229 million of U.S. taxpayer money that we have funded through this clown, okay? But at least he is using it in a carefully controlled manner so that all the people doing this research, of course their employees, will actually know they're subcontracted labs all over the world. But he tries. Aren't you comforted? He tries to have a presence there. And what kind of presence does he have? To have ironclad, control and due process and everything. They try to hire technicians. Okay. Don't you hate it when that authoritarian technician walks in on the job site and everybody just snaps to attention? They have technicians, or sometimes they will use PhD students, grad assistants. Okay. So, folks, what you have is a very loose conglomerate of people that are doing research that nobody else will fund except the U.S. taxpayer. And they're doing all kind of crazy stuff. What kind of crazy stuff are they up to? Well, I'm going to remind you.
But if you're saying these are diverse coronaviruses and you can't vaccinate against them, there are no antivirals, what do we do?
Well, so I think that coronaviruses are pretty good. I mean, you're a virologist, you know all this stuff, but you can manipulate them in the lab pretty easily. It's just spike protein drives a lot of what happens with the coronavirus.
Now, folks, I want to keep this moving right along, but that's what he's been doing with your taxpayer money. Manipulating coronaviruses, trying to increase the lethality, the virology, the antigenicity, all these other terms. They're trying to make something natural unnatural. And you can look it up in Wikipedia. It's called gain of function research, and it has never stopped. You can go through, and in the video that I mentioned earlier, I go through so many links and so many sources. But let me just give you the quickie version of it. There have been pauses along the way in funding, but nobody can show me where there has ever been a pause in the actual research. And who is doing the research? This loose conglomeration of people that are overseen by technicians and PhD students. Now, I want to keep rolling here, but I want to play you one more clip of Mr. DASZAK, because in that interview they talk about how different people have more interest or less interest in certain countries, but Peter DASZAK has reserved to himself a couple of countries that he is most interested in, and you're going to see it right now.
He's mostly in New York, but he'll go to field sites periodically and do work as well. Do you do that? Do you go out in the field?
Yeah,
ever?
I still do. I have two countries that I still kind of am in charge of in the organisation, China and Malaysia.
Okay.
I've got a long-term history of working in Malaysia, so does John.
Okay, so out of all the countries that this loose conglomeration does experiments in, that he funds, there are two countries in particular that he has first-hand involvement in, and they are, in reverse order, Malaysia and China. Do you think it is possible that Mr. Hype, Mr. The money follows the hype, do you think it's possible that Mr. pays all this attention to fundraising and media might be a little bit protective about what is said about one or more of the two countries that he is most involved in? Well, the answer is yes. We're going to go back into the article, and I'm going to show you. Back to the article. Almost as soon as deaths due to the virus began being reported in the United States and Europe in early 2020, questions were raised about the Wuhan lab's safety record and whether it might be responsible in some way for the outbreak. But the highly respected British medical journal, The Lancet, published a February 18, 2020 letter signed by 27 prominent public health officials and scientists, including DASZAK, that dismissed such questions as conspiracy theory thinking. Now, I am not suggesting anything. I'm just asking questions. So, Facebook fact checkers, I'm simply reading an article. So, fact off, fact down, fact back, fact off. Okay, just fact off. We're just reading an article. But everyone knows that in February of 2020, if you even dared mention that the safety record of the Wuhan lab might somehow come into question and something could have possibly escaped, well, you were a conspiracy theorist. But it's comforting to know that Master DASZAK was one of 27 other prominent, health officials and scientists and researchers that signed a letter that said, ain't no way, could never happen. And he was just one of them. He was just one of the group, right? No, not at all. This is where it really gets good. Okay, so we're going to get back to the article. So we're supposed to think that, Peter DASZAK was just, everybody else is signing it, so I guess, I thought I'd sign it too, right? Wrong. So here's where it says, emails obtained by U.S. Right to Know in November 2020 via public information requests revealed, now listen close to this, that DASZAK drafted the Lancet letter and was a prime mover in its composition and publication. So the letter that he just, there's a letter floating around and I just decided to sign it too. No, he's the one that wrote it. He was the author or one of the authors of it, and the letter only cited 2 studies as evidence for its conclusion. Well, at least they had 2 studies that they could rely on. Guess who did those 2 studies? Both were done by the Eco Health Alliance and the Wuhan lab. I mean, folks, you can't make this up. Now, we're going to go over here to I clicked on the link to the U.S. Right to Know, and here's what's interesting. Where did I find it? Okay. Second paragraph. Sorry, I was hesitating there. The emails obtained by a public records request show that Eco Health Alliance President Peter DASZAK drafted the Lancet statement. Folks, I just got to stop. He did a Raffensperger. He did a Brad Raffensperger. Remember in Georgia when President Trump and his attorneys had that hour-long phone call, and the attorney several times said this is about compromise and settlement. It was not Trump trying to force anybody to do anything. And Raffensperger ratted his way out. But later Raffensperger drafted his own press release. He's 1 o'clock in the morning in his underwear, drafting a press release, trying to pretend to be somebody in the media. That's exactly what DASZAK did. The emails obtained via public records show that EcoHealth Alliance President Peter DASZAK drafted the statement and that he intended for it to, listen to this, let me get back there, to not be identifiable as coming from any one organization or person, but rather to be seen as simply a letter coming from leading scientists. DASZAK wrote that he wanted to, quote, avoid the appearance of a political statement. Yeah, he wants to avoid a political statement. What he wants is a really broad-looking statement that he can hide behind, because this was over a year ago. Oh, make no mistake, he was nervous and sweating at the moment. But folks, he's a lot nervouser now. His nervosity has gone up quite a bit because this congresswoman and these 2 congressmen, they're asking questions, and there is a deadline of May 17th, and I would suggest you get in touch with these folks and let them know that you support them. But Peter DASZAK is on the hook, and he is wriggling. Now, I don't want to get lost in the woods, but I'm not ready to leave this article yet. Now, this is from the Right to Know. I want to read you this statement. It said, although the phrase Eco Health Alliance, that's DASZAK's organization, only appeared once in the Lancet statement, in association with co-author DASZAK, Several other co-authors also have direct ties to the group that were not disclosed as conflict of interest. Rita Caldwell, James Hughes are members of the board of directors of EcoHealth Alliance. William Koresh is the group's executive vice president for health and policy, and Hume Field is science and policy advisor. So they're all teaming up together to make this statement to cover their collective rear ends. And then this is from the actual email from Peter Daszak. And look how it's the headline: a statement in support of the scientists, public health, and medical professionals of China. Now, I don't know about you guys, but it really irks me that and this guy's from Britain originally. So here's not a national to the United States that has bilked us out of $250 million, and his first concern when the Wuhan virus breaks out is drafting a PR statement to make China look good. I don't like that. Now, I'm going to pick up where he's addressing this Hume, a board member. I've taken some of your comments and lightly edited. I've attached the revised version here. Linda, you're right. It would be good to be specific about the bioengineered virus conspiracy theory, but I think we should probably stick to a broad statement. And he goes on to say the presidents of the U.S. National Academies of Science drafted a letter that he expected to be released, and here's what they said. The initial views of the experts is that the available genomic data are consistent with natural evolution, and that there is currently no evidence that the virus was engineered to spread more quickly among humans. And this is what he had to say about that statement. I think this is a bit too specific because there are other conspiracies out there. Well, what he's really saying, that statement said there is currently no evidence. This is February 6th of 2020. Currently no evidence. Well, that doesn't mean more evidence is going to come out. It is not going to come out. And it's not going to come out if China doesn't let anybody go in and take a look, which they haven't. But this statement here is giving themselves a little bit of credibility room in case other evidence comes out. And that's what Peter Daszak didn't like. Now, this part that is highlighted in yellow. Please suggest names of your colleagues that you think might also be willing to support this. I'm sure some of these people are too busy right now to respond. And he lists all these doctors and scientists, I guess, that might sign on. Folks, I would say to you, anybody that signed on that letter is completely worthless and they need to be delicensed. They need to get the boot. Why? What did these people know about what was going on in Wuhan? What do they know about? Were these people there? Is this what they were doing on a regular basis? These are just some Me Too's that are given an opportunity to have their name thrown in the hat with some other people. So this whole thing is so important that it's coming out now. I got a closing statement that I'm going to make, but I want to say this, that the pressure is growing and the pressure is mounting, and the left wants you and me to believe that they've gotten away with this and a whole lot other. Folks, they ain't getting away with this. All right, I'm out of time and it's time to put a bow on it, so let's try to wrap up. I hope that you will take the time to view the video that I'm going to be releasing in a few days called Origins. And it goes through so much information that's relative to what we talked to this and a lot more. I go through a timeline. We go all the way back to 1995. And I talk about something that I call a trajectory. I live in northern Cincinnati in Butler County. And any given night I can walk out, look on the horizon, you see a bright light. And you wonder, is that a star? What is that? Well, sometimes you look away and then you look back and you find out that star moved, so it's not a star. It's a plane. But you can't really tell where it's going. But if you look away again and look back, then your mind can connect the dots and you develop a trajectory. And ladies and gentlemen, when you look back 20 years and you see that people are saying and doing certain things, and then you look back only 10 years and they're saying and doing the same things, you look back just 5 years and they're saying and doing the same things, and you look back just a few months and they're saying and doing the same things, guess what you have? You have a trajectory. You can see where they're going. Make no mistake. Peter DASZAK and company, I didn't even have time to get into Ralph Baric, a contemporary of his and Fauci's, all right, but these folks have been on the same trajectory for a long, long time. And gain of function research through this loose conglomerate of subcontracted researchers overseen by technicians and grad assistants, it has never stopped. It has never stopped. Oh, the White House and Fauci has announced, pauses in funding. Well, these people aren't funded like a weekly paycheck. The research has never stopped. And so what is the logical conclusion of that trajectory? That's what DASZAK is nervous about. And that's why these Congress people need to be applauded and they need to be supported, because FOJO does not want you to learn about what we just talked about. FOJO also doesn't want you to know what they discovered in Antrim County this week. FOJO does not want you to know what they're uncovering in Arizona. That's why FOJO has launched this effort to try to shut it down through these fake means of Civil Rights Commission, whatever. FOJO is faux, and FOJO is not going to stand. And FOJO and his father, the father of lies, they cannot overcome the truth. The truth will prevail. So keep the faith, keep up the fight. We're not going anywhere. So please like, please share, please subscribe, please leave a comment. Please call up your grandmother and your cousins and tell them to like, share, and subscribe and leave a comment. And until next time, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless the state of Ohio. And God bless the United States of America.
I hear the sweet